Okay, well, I think we're going to start there then as it's turn three. A massive welcome to everyone who's tuning in today. You can see in the chat there's people tuning in from all over the world, so that's great to see. And welcome to today's plenary and to the Rethinking Economics Festival as a whole. Today we're going to be talking about with Ha-Joon economic pluralism in the post-pandemic world, and we're incredibly lucky and appreciative that he's joining us today. The format of today's session is going to be a 40-minute presentation by Ha-Joon and then the opportunity for you guys in the chat to ask some questions. So please use the Zoom Q&A function for that. Due to the sheer number of participants we're having today, we're probably not going to get around to every question. But if you upvote questions that you kind of were going to ask about or would like to know about, that's a good way of trying to get everyone involved in the question process. Rita is going to be our host today. So if you're having any technical issues, please put them in the chat and we'll try and troubleshoot those. We're on Twitter at Rethink Econ, and if you want to tweet about the festival, please use the hashtag that you can see on the slide at the moment. We have a great schedule coming up over the next 5 days, so make sure after this session you kind of check out the schedule and see all the different webinars, panel discussions and plenaries that you can get involved in. So I think that's everything from me, so I'm going to pass over now to Ha-Joon and stop sharing my screen.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because we are joining from all over the world. So I think for a while we are going to change the way we greet each other, because we are all in different places and different time zones. I'm very honored to be invited to present this plenary session for the Rethinking Economics Festival. I mean, I've been closely working with people who set up and then have been running Rethinking Economics campaign, and it's always my pleasure to be back with them. Yeah, today I want to talk about the meaning of economic pluralism in the post-pandemic world. I mean, of course, Rethinking Economics has been explicitly founded upon the principle of pluralism, and I have been a very strong advocate of pluralism in economics. And yeah, I mean, there are obviously lots of reasons why you want pluralist economics, you know, starting from the value of intellectual diversity itself, the importance of mutual respect and tolerance. But for me, intellectually speaking, there are three most important reasons why we need pluralist economics. And in my view, these three have all become even more important as a consequence of the pandemic. So let me, first of all, outline why which are these three things that I think are important reasons to pursue pluralism, and then discuss how these are changing and going to change the way we do economics in a post-pandemic world. So first of all, we need economic pluralism because of the deficiency of orthodox neoclassical economics, which has, of course, a lot of strengths, but has a lot of weaknesses and blind spots. And of course, I'm not saying that other schools of economics don't have shortcomings. They all do. You know, every school has a particular political and ethical assumptions. They are interested in particular things. They develop theories to explain the phenomena that they are most interested in. So neoclassical economics is mainly about market exchange. There's hardly any mention of production. You know, the other schools that look at different things. So yeah, basically it's not uniquely neoclassical to have these weaknesses and blind spots, but those things matter more when it comes to neoclassical economics. First of all, because it's the intellectually and politically absolute dominant school in economics. So what it has more impact on the real world than what other schools do. And also that neoclassical economics is more problematic in its dominance, in that by construction, this is a very conservative doctrine. I don't mean necessarily right wing, but basically the point about neoclassical economics is that it takes the given distribution of income, wealth, and power as given, and then try to see how we can improve the world. So this very idea of Pareto improvement is based on the notion that you need to find solutions to social problems that do not hurt anyone while making some people better off. You know, it has that very respectable ethical foundation which I don't have time to go into, but it still gives a bias towards the status quo. You are trying to find a solution that does not involve, land reform, does not involve the redistribution of assets in a major way, does not involve hurting some groups to achieve the so-called greater good. So, basically the fact that neoclassical economics is dominant and has a rather kind of conservative view of the world makes it more problematic in its dominance of the subject of economics and public policy making in today's world. Secondly, I would say that pluralism is necessary because the real world is complex and no single economic theory is able to explain it. In discussing this, I have talked about what I call the Singapore problem, the fact that Singapore, despite having free trade and welcoming attitude toward foreign investors, also is a country where 90% is publicly owned, 85% of housing is provided by state-owned house board, and a staggering 22% of GDP is produced by state-owned enterprises. So, I often challenge my graduate students, look, give me one economic theory, it doesn't matter what it is, neoclassical, Marxist, Keynesian, that can single-handedly explain something like Singapore, and I dare say there is no such theory. Because that Singapore, like all other countries actually, although it's more extreme, has constructed this socio-economic system in order to meet the particular challenges that they have in order to work under the real world constraints that it has, and that without kind of committing itself to ideological solutions. Another interesting example is Sweden. Sweden is one of the most equal countries in the world, but in terms of corporate control, it is the most unequal country in the world, because there's one family called the Wallenberg family, spelled Wallenberg in English, but apparently read in Swedish Wallenberg, that basically has controlling stake in a series of companies whose collective capital market valuation is somewhere around half the entire Swedish stock exchange. So how can you have one family controlling basically half the corporate sector? And I'm saying controlling, they don't own 100% of these companies, but if you basically own 20-25% of the shares, you can more or less control how the company is managed. How come one of the most equal countries have one family that controls basically half the corporate sector? So this is the real world. There is no need kind kind of models that populate the real world. I mean, if you look closely enough, every country will have this kind of dimensions that do not fit with any given economic theory, that do not fit with the economic theory that the countries that they're claiming to follow. So anyway, so the real world is really complex, and you need more than one theory to explain it. And thirdly, I think we need pluralism in economics because we need to explicitly bring value judgment back into economics. In my view, well, I mean, lots of people share this view. A lot of differences between economic theories are not just about theorization of how, I don't know, we produce things, how we exchange things, and so on, but about the differences in underlying political and ethical values. I just talked about the inherent conservative bias of neoclassical economics, even though a lot of politically progressive people that also practice the neoclassical economics, like Joe Stiglitz, Paul Krugman, and so on. But I'm talking about this deeper level conservatism, the desire not to touch the underlying distribution of the wealth and power. And I mean, on top of that, neoclassical school has been styled itself as a branch of hard science and have steadfastly refused to recognize the value-laden nature of economics. So, you have all heard this, that Milton Friedman, positive economics, and people argue that there is no place for ethical judgments, in economics. And when you try to impose some kind of ethical judgment on society and economy, it, like, say, the former Soviet bloc economists did, then it leads to disaster. But I think this refusal to explicitly bring value judgment into economics is a huge deficiency of the neoclassical school, because it's not as if it doesn't have some underlying ethical value system. I mean, it has a very particular system of ethics, but these are hidden behind technical languages and equations. So in order to bring that value judgment out more clearly, I think it's important to have people study other schools of economics so that they can see why different schools are saying different things. Anyway, so these are the kind of background that we're going to see now about the post-pandemic economics. So first of all, the deficiency of orthodox neoclassical economics, it has been highlighted even more as a result of the pandemic, because what governments, companies, people in the real world have had to do as a result of this pandemic basically undermine virtually all of the fundamental tenets of orthodox neoclassical economics, especially regarding the boundary between the market and the state. So, all this the orthodoxy about the fiscal balance, I mean, these have been all thrown out. The German government that famous for is the desire to be physically conservative, it recently abolished this ceiling on public debt because it realized that without borrowing more, it cannot sustain the economy and keep people alive. Yeah? The U.S. Government, I mean, run by these Republicans who think that basically giving money to poor people is the crime against humanity. They have sent out all these the checks, to people. Some people have called it helicopter money, but in more concrete terms, that in the U.S. in the last 4 months or so, the government added like $600 to everyone's unemployment benefit, sometimes resulting in the people earning more than when they were employed. Yeah? I mean, orthodox economics has taught us that if you give the people the free money, they'll become lazy and they'll not want to find work. Yeah? But then even the Trump administration had to do this because otherwise the whole economy will collapse. Yeah? The UK and other governments have been paying companies to keep workers on the payroll. It is known as the job retention scheme in the UK, and yeah, basically this means that the government in these countries has been basically acting as the employer of last resort, yeah, not just that lender of last resort. Now, some countries are talking even about issuing government bonds with negative interest rates. Yeah? So everything has been overturned, and this shows how fragile the conclusions of the orthodox economics that have been. Yeah? So we need different theories to make sense of what's been going on, and more importantly, in the future, to build a better world out of this collapse of the old system through the pandemic. I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to happen, because the forces of conservatism are great, and like we have seen in the last the crisis, the global financial crisis of 2008, as soon as dust settled down, all these people are going to come out to maintain this status quo, and therefore what people do in terms of campaigning to change the world for the better will determine what kind of world we live in the next 5-10 years. But that's a subject for another day. Also, I think one critical weakness of orthodox economic theory has been exposed through this pandemic, namely is the neglect of the reproductive economy or the care economy. So in this crisis, we've realized that there has been a huge kind of segment of our society which has been engaged in basically free or very badly paid work, which is critical in keeping the society together. Yeah? So the household work, the care work that, well, mostly women do at home, unpaid, the nurses, the care home workers, delivery the workers, the people who work in the supermarkets and so on. All of these people and people producing food and other essentials of life, all these people have been more or less invisible, because they are badly paid, they are not organized, they don't have voice. Yeah, I mean, a lot of women are written off the economy because they do unpaid household work, which is often far more demanding than what people do outside home. But neoclassical economics count only marketed economic activity, so that they have become they have been basically invisible. Yeah? Anyway, this ignorance of the reproductive economy or the care economy actually applies to many other schools of economics. I'm not saying that neoclassical economics is unique in ignoring this, but especially given its emphasis on the marketized economy, the bias against the reproductive economy is even greater in neoclassical economics than in other schools. So we need insights, especially from the feminist economics, but also some parts of the Marxist and institutionalist schools, to be able to analyze the reproductive economy more carefully. And I think this is apart from the shifting boundary of market and the state that we have seen in the pandemic, this attention that we need to pay to the reproductive economy is a very important weakness of neoclassical economics that the pandemic has exposed. So I so far discussed how the pandemic has exposed the weaknesses of neoclassical economics and emphasized the need to kind of broaden our theoretical scope to bring in more pluralist perspective to understand the real world. The second reason why the second reason that justify pluralism in economics is the complexity of the world, as I just said. And in that respect, the pandemic has actually increased the complexity of the world, because now there are a lot of things happening and being discussed that have not really been discussed, that even imagined before by any school of economics. Yeah, some schools have talked about some things, but no one has even thought of this whole array of things that are being practiced and emerging. Like the job retention schemes. For example, for another example, South Korea, which has been very successful in controlling the pandemic itself, has realized that its welfare system is very deficient, especially because not just because that it's a very small welfare state. Second smallest in the whole of OECD, only bigger than that of Mexico's, even smaller than that of Chile's. And given Chile's reputation as the poster boy of neoliberalism, it's a shocking statistics. But in that country, through this pandemic, people have realized that a lot of people are not even covered by this small welfare state, because it's basically designed for people in full-time regular employment. So self-employed people, temporary workers, agency workers, all these people are not covered by the system. And these are people that some of you have seen in the famous Korean movie, The Parasite. It's something like that 25% of Korean population is in self-employment. Folding pizza boxes, working as temporary drivers, running fried chicken shops, trying to scrape a living. This ratio of self-employment is only about 6% in the US. In most OECD economies is around 12 to 10 to 15%. And South Korea is a huge number of self-employed people who are not covered by the welfare system. And now the countries are seriously contemplating whether they will introduce an unemployment insurance that covers everyone. In the same way that the country has the universal health insurance. Provision in the country is private largely, but everyone has the same health insurance. And now in a country which is so kind of traditionally against the very idea of the welfare state, is now willing to contemplate introducing an unemployment insurance system that covers literally everyone. Yeah, so my view is that, of course, some of these might be just talks, a lot will depend on how the pandemic itself progresses, and how people fight for changes, how people resist changes, and so on. But my guess is that a lot of countries will end up introducing things that we thought completely impossible even like 6 months ago. So when the countries innovate to introduce the new social compromises, the new policies, new institutions, like many of them did after the Great Depression and the Second World War, the world is going to be even more diverse and complex. And as a result, the ability of the single economic schools to explain the world will be even more diminished, which means that we need to basically introduce more and more different economic theories if we are going to understand the real world, which is going to become increasingly more complex. The third thing that the pandemic has done to increase the need for economic pluralism, as I mentioned earlier, is the increased need and recognition of the need for more explicit and systematic inclusion of value judgment in economics. So I have said that even though it has an implicit value system, implicit ethical position, the orthodox neoclassical economics, the orthodox neoclassical economics has tried its best to purge the value judgment from economics. Well, in a way, I mean, this is basically, implicitly arguing that only their value judgment is a valid one and everything else is unacceptable. I mean, I can talk about this a bit more if there's a relevant question, but yeah, so basically it has been arguing that all these attempts to have a notion of good life, what is the more important in society, what should be social priorities, all these attempts to make the value judgment is wrong. So basically, to simplify a bit, what neoclassical economics says is that let's not make any judgment. Let the market decide and come up with this, evolutionary spontaneous judgment. So don't say that that such and such job is more important than others. Let's see what people think. It's a more, if you like, democratic way of deciding what is good. So let's see how much people are willing to pay for certain types of goods and services and the labor. Let's see, I mean, who gets paid the most to decide who is the most valuable to society. And that is much better than, I don't know, the Central Planning Bureau or some kind of benign philosopher king trying to decide, this is good for the society, so everyone should have it. This is a bad one, let's ban, I don't know, the rock and roll or Coca-Cola or whatever. Let people decide. So this was a way of kind of pretending that it doesn't have any value judgment. But this pandemic has exposed this is a kind of untenable position. Because now we are seeing countries identifying certain types of workers as being essential or key. The UK has this concept of key workers. The US had this the concept of essential employees, and I'm sure other countries had their equivalents. Sometimes these people are even called heroes. And these are, except for medical doctors, mostly people who looked down upon because they were low-paid workers. People who work in healthcare, old age homes, people working in the agriculture, food processing, primary and secondary education, grocery stores, delivery services. These are mostly jobs that are done by low-paid workers with very often unstable contracts. So according to the market logic, these are people who the societies really didn't need, really didn't value. But then through this pandemic, we realized that without these people, as well as the household work and care work that are done unpaid at home, mostly by women, without these things, the whole society would have collapsed. So Britain for a while had this ritual of people clapping for the National Health Service workers at 8 o'clock every Thursday, while actually refusing to raise their wages. So there were a lot of memes going around on the internet, kind of a nurse or medical doctor standing in a queue in a cafeteria or a shop saying, do you accept applauses for payments? So the recognition was that made that actually some things are more important than others, and this is basically an anathema to neoclassical economics, because it has been trying at least for 1.5 centuries, to try to avoid saying that we can make a judgment on what is more important, what is more valuable, independently of the market. Now, when you think about it, this idea that market valuation should be accepted as the valuation, the social valuation of anything, physical objects, people, their labor. This is basically a very kind of undemocratic system, because what is market in the end? I mean, it's that basically $1, one vote system. Yeah? So the world is spending a lot more money on things like slimming pills and cosmetic surgeries than on research on tropical diseases. Yeah? Because people who die of tropical diseases do not have much money, and money is in catering for middle class, upper middle class, not to speak of the rich people in the rich countries. Yeah? And this idea that we have to basically leave things to the market will need to be confronted strongly, because of the coming kind of the crisis, if you like, that involve, well, not just the pandemic, but also the climate change. Yeah? So in the pandemic, as the pandemic evolves, there's a lot of attempt to develop vaccines. Now, if you leave this the vaccine to the market, basically only people in the rich countries will get it. Yeah? So there is a campaign for what is sometimes known as a people's vaccine, saying that this vaccine has to be available to everyone. Yeah? But try to do it through the market mechanism. There'll be the strong protection of intellectual property rights. These companies that develop vaccine will have a monopoly right over there. Then they'll be able to charge anything they like. So we need to basically be able to say that we need to suspend the market mechanism when it comes to things like this basic survival and health. Yeah? And indeed, that this is actually allowed under the current, even under the current intellectual property right regime. Yeah? I mean, countries can suspend patents or force the companies to license their patents at the low price if there's a public agency. Yeah? So even the system recognizes the need for this, but and when these companies at least initially trying to charge very high prices to people who really cannot afford it, when that happens, I think we'll see this struggle more clearly. And similar climate change, this pandemic has revealed how human activities have been. I mean, at one level, it's ridiculous that we have to debate it, but a lot of people have been denying that climate change has anything to do with human activities, and this pandemic, by a lot of activities, have shown how the climate changes are anthropogenic, and it has shown how if we all act in concert, you can actually make the big difference to climate change. Yeah? And how, I mean, the pandemic has also shown that how the whole world, the whole humanities are bound in common destiny. So yes, I mean, the pandemic has shown that there are indeed clear priorities in human existence. Yeah? We cannot just let people with money to make the decision for everyone by allowing everything to be decided by the market. Yeah? Now, there are good reasons why you want market in many things. Yeah? I'm not anti-market, but there are certain things that that everyone should be able to have. Yeah? Access to things like coronavirus vaccine, yeah, access to safe drinking water, access to toilets and sanitation facilities, access to the internet, and so on. Yeah, so let's not be afraid of saying that these are things that everyone has to have. Yeah, there are such things as essential goods, essential services, basic human rights. Yeah, and we are going to suspend the market mechanism when it comes to these things. Yeah? And I think that the pandemic has kind of forced us to confront this issue. We cannot kind of avoid it anymore. I mean, we now have to have a kind of the very explicit debate on what should be taken out of the market, what should be kept in the market, and in that debate, ethical values will be the guiding principles. So economists cannot avoid ethical judgment or say that you should avoid judgments anymore. I mean, I think that neo-classical economics, even while it pretends the ethical judgment, it avoids normative issues. It is based on a very ethical system, a particular normative principles, but has avoided making that explicit. It has avoided having a debate on that, and I think the pandemic has made us see that this debate cannot be avoided anymore. Okay, so I have slightly gone over time, but kept to my 40 minutes, and I would now stop my lecture and try to deal with the questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much, first of all, for that. It was really amazing and informative, and the time was fine. So the first question by Stephen Luengo, which has been the most upvoted, is about what economic school of thought is more concerned with equitability and sustainability in production and distribution, because, according to Stephen, neoclassical economics seems to put too much emphasis on efficiency, and inequality and climate change are in fact the main challenges of our time. So
yeah, well, not only does neoclassical economics put too much emphasis on efficiency, its definition of efficiency itself is problematic. Yeah? So if you, of course, in practice they use the term rather loosely, but if you really stick to the core theoretical tenets of neoclassical economics, efficiency is defined as in, if you like, the Paretian terms. Yeah, if you can increase the output for some things, but if you have to make someone worse off than before, then it is not efficient according to neoclassical definition. So the concept of efficiency itself has the kind of huge problems. But leave that aside for the moment. Yes, I mean that the emphasis of neoclassical economics is in efficiency and at most on economic growth. Yeah, because it basically sees things that human beings live for greater material consumption or greater leisure time. I mean, there's no place for other values. Yeah, and it sees that the economics as the economy as something that is isolated from the rest of the world. So things like environmental sustainability, the reproductive economy, it doesn't have any place in it. And it is, on top of that, very short-sighted, because when the neoclassical economists make kind of policy judgments, they use the discount rate, which basically makes however low the rate of discount is, which makes that anything that happens after 50 years that irrelevant. So that there's a whole set of issues, but on the issue of equity, yes, I mean that basically I earlier mentioned that it has this conservative bias. It doesn't want to change the underlying distribution of income, wealth, and power, and that means that that it cannot really take this issue of inequality head on, because that if you try to stick to this Pareto principle, you cannot make anyone worse off to make a social improvement. Then there's rather little that you can do to change inequality. So yeah, the point is that the whole setup of this school is very narrow and based on a very particular ethical position, and there are so many issues that cannot be really resolved within that framework. So the very concept of efficiency is problematic. The things like environmental sustainability or even economic sustainability is not really taken seriously. Equity is a kind of non-issue almost by construction. So yes, I mean that it is not fit to deal with many of the problems that concern us in this time and age.
So in terms of a particular economic school of thought that does address equitability and sustainability better, do you have any in mind, or is it more of a kind of we need to use all of them in a pluralist way kind of approach?
Yeah, I would say that pluralism is the answer here, because I mean the ecological school might be the best in understanding the sustainability issues, but it may not be very good at analyzing inequality. The different schools have different takes on inequality issues. Today even some neoclassical economists like Thomas Piketty that have started talking about inequality, but the Marxist school, the Keynesian school, they have some very important things to say about inequality. So yeah, I would say that basically that we have to look at all the different schools and try to find the kind of the more kind of sophisticated solutions.
Okay, amazing. So we have another question now from Liliana Fargo, who asks, do you believe that COVID-19 will generate a realignment of economic power at the world level?
Yes.
There's also,
no, go ahead. Yeah.
And there's also some comments more generally about how economic power is fails to be dealt with adequately in neoclassical economics. So maybe that's something else as well.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, so that on the second one first, yes, I mean, the power is something that basically doesn't exist in neoclassical economics. So the only power that exists there is market power. But there's no, so the monopoly, monopsony, these kind of things, yes. But there's no recognition that the people have power to discriminate, for example. There's no discussion of power to influence what other people think. For example, when Barack Obama was trying to introduce this healthcare reform. I mean, there were these amazing pictures of American pensioners demonstrating against that reform, saying that with placards like the government hands off my Medicare. Hello, government hands off Medicare. Medicare is a government program. But these people have been so brainwashed by the American health insurance industry that government programs never work. You have to have private programs. They couldn't even imagine that this Medicare is a government program. So when you have the power to influence what people think, actually, why do you need the army and the police? And basically, you can control what the people do. They'll buy what you want. They'll vote for politicians that you want. And also the form, the sites of the production, if you like, it's the run on hierarchical, the power-based system. That of course there are a few kind of cooperatives and so on, but in most capitalist firms, I mean, basically the decision is made at the top, and the people lower down the hierarchy has to kind of carry it out. There's no democracy. There's no discussion. There's no kind of the respect for other people's opinion. I mean, it's a hierarchical organization. So that everywhere there's that power hidden in the economy. But I mean, that basically the neoclassical economics has tried very hard even to deny the existence of power. So they say, well, the discrimination exists only because the market is not allowed to kind of be completely free, because in the completely free market, employers who discriminate against people because of their gender or the skin color or the cultural background or the sexual orientation, they lose out, because if they keep hiring the idiots who have the right skin color and is of the right gender, they'll be out competed by the firms that are more open. And the reason that the only reason why this is not happening is there must be something in the real world that makes the markets imperfect. Maybe it's some kind of government regulation. Maybe it's the union power or whatever. So yes, I mean, power is one thing, one huge black hole that neoclassical economics has. Now, is the power relationship in the world going to be realigned after the pandemic? Yes, I hope so. I think some of it will happen. And I discussed some of these things in the last in my presentation, but a lot will depend, first of all, on how long and in what form this pandemic lasts. I mean, the more upheaval there is, there might be greater demand for changes. There might be greater need for changes. But the more important thing is that what we do as active social agents. I mean, of course, that with all this lockdown and social distancing and so on, traditional ways of making voices heard, like demonstrations and the big gatherings and so on, they are becoming, they have become difficult. But I mean, yeah, basically, that to put it crudely, I mean, people who benefit from the pre-pandemic system will do their best to prevent fundamental changes. especially in the power relationships. Yeah? So people who want changes need to make that happen. Yeah? And in all this Black Lives Matter campaign, the campaign against that racist history, the people's that coming together that in solidarity through this pandemic. I think there have been a lot of positive developments that make me cautiously optimistic about major realignment of power. But I'm not a political scientist. That I don't claim to have any expertise in predicting this because on the one hand, the powerful, the big crisis create bigger need for changes, but also it can make people less willing to stick their neck out in terms of demanding changes, because that when everyone's losing their job, when you're trying to feed your family, it's that difficult to kind of engage in political activities. So yeah, I think there have been a lot of things that make me think that there'll be some big realignment of power, but I don't dare to make any firm prediction here.
Okay, amazing. So the next two questions are pretty linked to what you were just talking about, actually. So they're about kind of after the 1929 Wall Street crash, and also after the global financial crisis. There was like the narrative that everything was going to change, but after the Wall Street crash, the ideas might have taken a while to come back, but they ended up coming back. And after the global financial crisis, it seemed that nothing really changed at all. So people are wondering, kind of along the lines of what you were just saying, is this the start of a new economic age? And I guess also from like a Rethinking Economics campaigning perspective, is there anything that you think we can learn from that happened after the global financial crisis that might be something we should implement in our campaigning going forward?
Yes. No, I think the 2008 global financial crisis really created a lot of hope among people that things will change. But yeah, unfortunately, I think I mean, individual academics or even campaign groups are like Rethinking Economics, they can influence the policies only so much. I mean, we need politicians and the public, civil servants and so on to actually make changes in the policies. And unfortunately, the if you like alternative political leaders have failed to come up with a convincing narrative would lead to the power realignment after the global financial crisis. I mean, to take the example of the UK, which I'm familiar with, after the financial crisis, of course, the Labour Party was partly responsible for the crisis because they, with Tony Blair's new Labour agenda, they basically bought into the neoliberal paradigm. So the only difference was okay, that neoliberalism is great, but also take care of some of the victims that the system creates. Yeah. Whereas the Tory line is that the neoliberalism is great, and who cares about the victim, so-called victims? Yeah. So they went along with this the deregulated finance and everything. So they cannot wash their hands off, but they were very slow in coming back with an alternative narrative when the Tories, after a short silence, came back with this narrative of austerity. I mean, this idea that the government have to be balanced in the same way that the books of household or company. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea. I mean, Keynes and many people have criticized it, but that's a kind of academic argument. Yeah? The politicians that should have translated it into terms that regular citizens that would understand, but they fail to do that. And once that the battle over the economic narrative was lost, then all the other things kind of followed, because the people basically control the media. So once their narrative dominant in the sort of political circles, then just dominates everything. And then the result of people, according to economics, it shouldn't happen. People actually voting for policies that will hurt them. So I think that I'm not too optimistic about this time around too, because it's very difficult to upstage the status quo. But I think the shock has been greater, and it has exposed so many more problems with the neoliberal system, not just the financial system, but the whole thing, the healthcare system, the welfare state, the labor market, unemployment, sustainability, racism. So I think that probably this time we have greater for kind of changing the narrative. I don't know that the lead kind of the existing politicians that can. I mean, I'm not too optimistic about them changing the narrative dramatically, but people like the Rethinking group, academics, individual citizens, we all have to keep making demands that have to keep talking about it, because if we just left it to the politicians, we are probably going to see the rerun of the 2008 financial crisis. There comes a vaccine in 2 years or whatever, and then they'll try to turn the clock back, pretend that nothing happened, and then carry on as they used to.
Okay, amazing. So we were originally scheduled to end now, but I believe, Ha-Joon, you're willing to stay a bit longer to answer some more questions.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Cool. So if you guys have to go, yeah. So if you guys have to go, this is all going to be uploaded onto the Rethinking Economics Festival website. But I'm gonna move on to another question. So, for those of you, this question's about donut economics and Kate Raworth's idea of the donut. So for those of you that don't know, it's an alternative way of kind of looking at growth and development, which imagines economies as kind of needing to find the right balance between over kind of extracting from the environment, but also sustaining like citizens' basic needs. I'm sure we can get a link into the chat of it actually. But yeah, so someone who's remained anonymous was wondering, do you think it's, as an alternative approach, it's the correct way to go, or what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, put it this way, I mean, we have to take environmental sustainability and, as I said, reproductive economy very seriously. So yeah, in that sense, the Kate's approach is, of course, one of the approaches that tries to do that. But is that necessarily the only approach? I mean, there are. I mean, I'm not an expert on environmental economics, but there are many different approaches to this issue. But yes, I mean, I completely agree that we need to take this the issue seriously in the kind of most the kind of well, in the strongest way possible, because when the environment collapses, and also when the reproductive economy collapses, nothing else that can exist. Yeah? So yes, I mean, in that sense, yeah.
Okay, amazing. And then I think we're going to ask one last question, and then we'll probably wrap things up. So this is currently the top voted one, and it's from Nelly Vaninen, who asks, "What is your take on universal basic income as the instrument to extend the social security system to the whole population?"
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, first of all, it depends on how it is done, because there are different uses of basic income. Yeah? So don't forget that Milton Friedman and Friedrich von Hayek were also supporters of universal basic income. Yeah? But their universal basic income basically abolished the state, give people some amount of money that will allow them to survive, and then they can buy the insurance if they want, yeah. But that if they want to buy another TV, that who are you to tell them not to do that? Yeah. So that kind of the universal basic income, I'm 200% against. Yeah. This is the version that is often advocated by Silicon Valley billionaires. Yeah. So basically, they want to say we bribe the population with that enough sum of money to shut them up, and then we do everything as we want. Yeah? I mean, if it's that kind of universal basic income, I'm 200% against it. Yeah? There are more progressive forms, but I think the people who talk about the universal basic income, but two issues. One is that it's not clear to me whether they also want to kind of curtail the public provision of social insurances, yeah? Because the welfare state that if it's based on universal citizenship is basically a collective insurance scheme, yeah? Insurance against all the things that anyone can experience, yeah? Education, old age, unemployment, health problems, yeah? So I mean, one important benefit of having this universal welfare state is that you can cut down the cost of the insurance hugely. Because just imagine if the one hospital goes to a pharmaceutical company and say we want to buy diabetes drugs for 50,000 people, the kind of discount that they can get is going to be nothing compared to, say, the NHS going to this company and saying we want diabetes drugs for 15 million people. Yeah? So the welfare state actually saves a lot of cost. It also cuts out a lot of middlemen, the pension fund companies, the medical insurance companies. What people don't realize is the US, despite having a relatively small welfare state, it spends about 90% of GDP on social spending, social public spending, compared to OECD average of 21%, or sometimes, in some countries, 30% also, in countries like France and Finland. But if you add all the private spending that goes into insurance, especially health insurance, the US actually has the second highest spending on social insurance in the world. Yeah? So it's not like they are not spending money on health insurance, education insurance, or whatever. But because there are so many middlemen taking profit, the US, despite spending something like 17% of GDP on healthcare compared to 8 to 11% in other developed countries, the US that has the worst health statistics. I mean, it's not entirely because of this middleman. I mean, it's also got huge inequality problem, but the problems with diet and so on. But so one important function of universal welfare state is to cut down on the cost of providing these insurances. And it's not clear to me whether those who are advocating universal basic income really think about this aspect, because if you are taking money out of your welfare budget to give it in cash basically to everyone, then you will necessarily spend less on providing it yourself. And then are you going to let the private sector provide these insurances? Wouldn't that raise the cost? So that's one issue that I'm worried about. But the other issue is that I don't know, people who advocate that universal basic income, well, not all of them, but most of them out described as left-wing libertarians. So instead of the government saying that, oh, you have to, you can have entitlement to healthcare, education, unemployment insurance, and so on, they are saying, well, give them cash, so that they can decide how to spend the money. I'm not sure whether it's an approach that I would personally advocate, because I think that society as a collective has a right to decide that there are certain essential things, certain basic human rights that entitle everyone to certain things. And yeah, sometimes that you want to kind of make people consume certain things, because that through regulation, because that the very experience of consuming changes your preference. So that ask, I don't know, a little kid that whether he wants to go to school, I think most of them will say no. But that once they are in school, they begin to see the benefit of education and so on. So I mean, it's an extreme example, but that it is well known that a lot of people fail to save enough for their old age, because that human beings find it difficult to look into far future. So that maybe it is necessary to force people to save something, through a compulsory pension system or the national insurance system. So I don't know. I mean, I think that is something that is more debatable than my first point. But I think we need to have a more debate on whether there are some things that we have to collectively provide through compulsory citizenship-based insurance scheme. And that might mean that we don't have a lot of money to spend on the universal basic income. So yes, I mean, I agree that it can be designed in such a way that is compatible with the universal welfare state. But I think it's very important to kind of recognize that whether it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing depends a lot on how you design it. Okay, let's.
Okay, amazing. Well, thanks so much for today, Ha-Joon. I think we're going to wrap things up there. And thank you for everyone to coming. I think we were averaging around 400 participants for lots of that, which is a huge number. So it's great to see so many people. Right now in the chat, we're putting a link to two things. Firstly, there's a survey that only takes 4 minutes that we're doing at Rethinking Economics, and it'd be great if you guys could fill it out for us. And also a link to Professor Ha-Joon Chang's book, Economics, the User Guide, which speaks a lot more about all these different types of issues. So if you're interested in that, you can check them out there. Please make sure to check out the schedule. We've got 4 more days of amazing events with panel discussions. And sorry we didn't get around to all 40 questions. I think that would have been a bit ambitious. But I'm sure lots of those questions will be covered in the other sessions that are going to be taking place. So yeah, so I think that's it for this plenary. It was great to see all you guys, and we'll leave it there. Thanks again, Ha-Joon.
Thank you.